They left me alone in that room with a cobra. My own family. The people who were supposed to protect me. And for years I stayed silent because I was taught that royal secrets must never leave the palace walls. But today, I'm breaking that silence. My name is Princess Yasmin, and this is the story of how my family tried to erase me. If you want to know what really happens behind the golden doors of palaces, behind the jewels and the smiles for cameras, then stay with me until the very end of this video. Subscribe now, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter everything you think you know about royal life. And please, share this story, because there are others like me who are still trapped in silence. I was born into a world most people only dream about. Crystal chandeliers, servants at every corner, silk dresses that cost more than houses, and a name that commanded respect wherever I went. Princess Yasmin of the House of Al-Rashid. That's what they called me. But names mean nothing when you're born a girl in a family that only values sons. My mother told me on my 7th birthday that I was a disappointment. Not in those exact words, of course. She was too refined for that. She simply said, while brushing my long black hair in front of her vanity mirror, "Your father wanted a son. We all did. But Allah had other plans." She said it so casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. I remember looking at my reflection in that mirror and wondering what was so wrong with me that even my own mother couldn't hide her disappointment. I had 3 older brothers. Khalid, the crown prince, was my father's pride and joy. Everything he did was celebrated, praised, rewarded. Then there was Rashid, the military son, strong and commanding, always in uniform, and Omar, the scholar, the one who could quote ancient texts and negotiate with foreign dignitaries. They were the golden trinity, the future of our kingdom. And then there was me, the accident, the girl who should have been a boy. Growing up in the palace was like living in a beautiful prison. Every move I made was watched, criticized, corrected. I couldn't laugh too loud because that wasn't princess-like. I couldn't run in the gardens because that was unladylike. I couldn't ask too many questions because curiosity was dangerous in a woman. I was being molded, shaped, compressed into a tiny box labeled perfect royal wife. That was my only purpose, my only value. To be married off to strengthen an alliance, to produce heirs, to smile and stay silent. But I wasn't good at staying silent. That was my first mistake. When I was 15, I started asking questions. Why couldn't I attend the same schools as my brothers? Why couldn't I travel abroad to study? Why couldn't I choose my own future? My father's response was always the same. Because you are a princess, and princesses have duties, not dreams. My mother was worse. She would slap me across the face for even suggesting such things. "You ungrateful child," she would hiss. "Do you know how many girls would kill to have your life? You have everything, and still you complain." But I didn't have everything. I had nothing. I had gold chains instead of iron ones, but I was still chained. The real nightmare began when I turned 17. That's when my father announced my engagement. I wasn't asked. I wasn't consulted. I was simply told, "You will marry Prince Abdullah of the Northern Province. The wedding will be in 6 months. This alliance will secure our family's position for generations." I had never met Prince Abdullah. All I knew was that he was 43 years old, had 2 wives already, and a reputation for cruelty. The servants whispered about how his previous wives were never seen in public, how they lived in separate wings of his palace, isolated and controlled. But none of that mattered to my family. What mattered was power, influence, and the oil rights that came with this marriage. I did something I had never done before. I refused. I walked into my father's office, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my chest, and I said, "I won't marry him. I won't do it." The silence that followed was deafening. My father slowly looked up from his papers, his eyes cold as ice. "What did you say?" I said I won't marry him. I don't love him. I don't even know him. Please, Father, don't make me do this. I was begging now, tears streaming down my face. I'll do anything else. I'll study diplomacy. I'll represent the family abroad. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, don't sell me to that man. My father stood up slowly. He walked around his desk and stood in front of me. For a moment, I thought he might actually listen. Then he slapped me so hard that I fell to the floor. You will do as you're told. You are not a person, Yasmin. You are a tool, a means to an end, and you will serve your purpose. That night, I tried to run away. I packed a small bag, took some jewelry I could sell, and tried to sneak out through the service entrance. But they were waiting for me, my brothers. They grabbed me, dragged me back to my room, and locked me inside. For 3 days, no one came. No food, no water, nothing. They were teaching me a lesson about obedience. When they finally let me out, I was weak, dehydrated, and broken. My mother came to my room with a glass of water and a cold smile. Have you learned your lesson? I nodded. I had no strength left to fight. Good. The wedding preparations will continue. You will smile, you will be gracious, and you will never embarrass this family again. But I couldn't give up. Not completely. I started secretly meeting with one of the younger servants, a girl named Layla, who had become my only friend in that prison. She helped me contact a human rights organization, journalists, anyone who might be able to help me. We were careful. We thought we were smart. But we weren't smart enough. They found out. I don't know how, but they did. One morning, Layla simply disappeared. I asked everyone, but nobody would tell me anything. It was as if she had never existed. Years later, I would learn that they had sent her back to her home country and paid her family to keep quiet. She had been my only ally, and they had erased her from my life like she meant nothing. That's when I realized the truth. I was completely alone, trapped, and no one was coming to save me. The wedding was 2 months away. I had stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I was a ghost wandering the palace halls. My mother would force makeup on me for family photos, pinch my cheeks to bring color back, threaten me if I didn't smile. You will not ruin this for us, she would say through gritted teeth. You will play your part. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to my brother Khalid, the crown prince, the one I had once looked up to as a child. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would help me. Please, I begged him. You're going to be king one day. You can stop this. You can tell Father that this is wrong. He looked at me with something like pity, but not enough of it to matter. Yasmin, you need to understand something. This is bigger than you. This marriage secures our kingdom's future. Your happiness, your feelings, they don't matter in the bigger picture. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You need to accept your fate. Accept my fate? I screamed at him. I'm being sold like cattle. How can you just stand there and tell me to accept it? He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. Lower your voice, and yes, accept it. Because if you don't, things will get much worse for you. Trust me on that. That was a threat. I understood it clearly. But I didn't know then just how far they would go. 3 weeks before the wedding, something changed. My family suddenly became almost kind to me. They stopped the harsh words, the punishments. My mother even smiled at me a few times. I should have known something was wrong. Predators are always kindest right before they strike. They told me we were going to the summer palace for a few days. A chance to relax before the wedding stress. A family bonding trip. I didn't want to go, but I had no choice. We drove for hours into the desert, to a palace I had only visited once as a small child. It was beautiful but isolated, surrounded by nothing but sand and sun. The first day was almost normal. We had dinner together. They asked me about the wedding preparations. They acted like a real family. I was so desperate for their approval, for their love, that I actually started to believe things might be okay. That was my mistake. Hope is dangerous when you're dealing with people who see you as property. On the second night, after dinner, my father asked me to come to the library. He wanted to talk, he said. Just the two of us. When I entered the room, I immediately felt something was wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. My father was standing by the window, his back to me. "Close the door, Yasmin." I did. "Come here." I walked toward him slowly. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, in a large glass enclosure, was a cobra. A massive, beautiful, deadly cobra. I froze. "Do you know what that is?" my father asked calmly. "It's a desert cobra. One of the most venomous snakes in the world. A single bite can kill a person in less than an hour. Painful death, paralysis, difficulty breathing, cardiac arrest." He turned to look at me. "Do you know why I'm showing you this?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. "Because you need to understand something, Yasmin. In 3 weeks, you will marry Prince Abdullah. You will smile, you will be obedient, and you will never speak of running away again. Because if you try anything, if you embarrass this family in any way, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. "Good. Now I need you to prove to me that you understand. I need you to show me that you're committed to this family." He walked to the door and opened it. My brothers were standing there. "I'm going to leave you in this room for 1 hour, alone with the cobra. If you can stay calm, if you can show me that you have the strength and discipline that this family requires, then we'll know you're ready to be a proper princess." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Father, please, no. Please don't do this." But he was already walking out. My brothers followed. The door closed behind them. I heard the lock click. I was alone in that room with a cobra. I pressed myself against the wall, as far from the glass enclosure as I could get. My heart was racing. I could see the cobra moving inside the glass, its tongue flicking in and out, its eyes watching me. For the first few minutes, I just stood there, frozen in terror. Then I started looking for a way out. The windows were too high and barred. The door was locked from the outside. There was no escape. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't a test. This was a warning. They were showing me exactly how powerless I was. They could kill me if they wanted to, and no one would ever know. No one would even ask questions. Princess Yasmin died tragically from a snakebite during a family vacation. How sad, how unfortunate. I started crying. Not quiet tears, but full, body-shaking sobs. I screamed for them to let me out. I pounded on the door until my fists were bruised. Nothing. No one came. The cobra kept moving in its enclosure, and I kept thinking about what my father had said. 1 bite. 1 hour. Painful death. Then something worse happened. I heard a sound. The sound of the enclosure opening. I looked over in horror and saw that the top of the glass case was sliding open. They had rigged it somehow, controlled it from outside the room. The cobra was going to be released. They were actually going to let it out. "No, no, no, please!" I screamed. "Father, please! I'll do anything! I'll marry him, I promise! Please don't do this!" But the enclosure kept opening. The cobra raised its head, sensing its freedom. This was it. This was how I was going to die. Killed by my own family. I don't know what happened next. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just luck. But I ran to the other side of the room, grabbed a heavy book from the shelf, and threw it at the enclosure. The book hit the glass and the cobra recoiled, distracted for just a moment. I grabbed anything I could find: books, a lamp, a chair, and built a barrier between myself and the snake. It wasn't much, but it was something. The cobra slithered out of the enclosure. I watched in terror as it moved across the floor, its body undulating, its head raised and alert. It came toward my makeshift barrier. I held my breath, trying not to move, not to make a sound. The snake explored the room, moving along the walls, and I slowly, carefully, moved in the opposite direction, always keeping furniture between us. Time stopped meaning anything. It could have been minutes or hours. I was drenched in sweat, shaking, on the verge of collapse. The cobra eventually found a cool corner and coiled up there. I stayed on the opposite side of the room, standing on a chair, not daring to move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the lock turn. The door opened. My father stood there with my brothers. They looked at me, then at the cobra, then back at me. My father actually smiled. "Well done, Yasmin. You passed the test. You didn't panic. You survived." He nodded to Omar, who went into the room with a pole and a bag and expertly captured the cobra. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was in complete shock. My father approached me and put his hand on my shoulder. "Now you understand what happens when you disobey this family. There are worse things than an arranged marriage, Yasmin. Much worse things. I hope you'll remember that." They took me back to my room. No one mentioned what had happened. It was as if it never occurred. But I was changed forever. That night, I realized that my family didn't just see me as property. They saw me as expendable. They would rather kill me than let me embarrass them. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I stopped fighting. What was the point? They had broken me completely. I went through the wedding preparations like a robot. Dress fittings, menu tastings, photo shoots. I smiled when told to smile. I spoke when told to speak. Inside, I was dead. The day before the wedding, something unexpected happened. Prince Abdullah came to visit. We were supposed to have tea together, a formal meeting before the ceremony. I was escorted to the garden where he was waiting. He was exactly as I had imagined. Older, stern, with eyes that looked through me rather than at me. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he spoke. "You don't want to marry me?" It wasn't a question. I looked up, startled. I will do my duty," I said carefully. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't lie to me, girl. I can see it in your eyes. You're terrified." He leaned back in his chair. "Let me tell you something. I don't want this marriage either. I have enough wives, enough problems. But your father offered me something I couldn't refuse. Oil rights, trade agreements, political alliance. So here we are. 2 people forced into a situation neither of us wants." I found my voice. "Then why don't you stop it? You have the power. Just say no." He shook his head. "Power is not as simple as you think, child. I have obligations, debts, promises to keep. Just like you." He stood up to leave, then paused. "I'll tell you this, though. I'm not a monster. I won't hurt you. But I won't love you either. You'll live in your wing of the palace. I'll live in mine. You'll do what's expected of you. Appear at events, smile for cameras, eventually produce an heir. That's all. Consider yourself lucky. Many women in your position have it much worse." That conversation should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me feel even more hopeless. This was my future. A life of emptiness, of going through the motions, of slowly dying inside while wearing a crown. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the balcony of my room and looked at the stars. I thought about jumping. It would be so easy. Just climb over the rail and let go. At least then it would be over. At least then I would be making my own choice, controlling my own fate. I climbed up onto the rail, my feet balanced on the narrow edge. The ground was so far below. One step. That's all it would take. Please don't. I turned my head. It was one of the younger maids, a girl I barely knew. She was standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes. Please, princess, don't do it. I looked at her, confused. Why do you care? She came closer. Because I've seen what happens to girls like us, girls who are trapped, who can't escape. And I've seen what it does to the ones left behind. If you jump, they'll just say you were unstable, crazy. They'll use your death to control others, to prove that disobedience leads to tragedy. Don't give them that power. Something about her words reached me. I climbed back down from the rail. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. She sat with me, holding my hand, saying nothing. We stayed like that until dawn. The wedding day arrived. I was dressed in a gown worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Diamonds in my hair, gold around my neck, silk and lace covering every inch of me. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. She looked like a princess. She looked perfect. She looked dead inside. The ceremony was massive. Hundreds of guests, cameras everywhere, music and flowers and celebration. I walked down the aisle toward Prince Abdullah, my father on one arm, my mother on the other. They were both smiling, so proud. I was delivering everything they wanted. I was finally being useful. When the imam asked if I consented to this marriage, I opened my mouth. This was the moment. I could still say no. I could still refuse. But then I looked at my father's face. I saw the warning in his eyes. I remembered the cobra. I remembered being locked in that room, waiting to die. And I said, yes, I consent. The celebration lasted 3 days. 3 days of pretending to be happy, of accepting congratulations, of playing the role of the blushing bride. And then it was time to leave with my new husband, to start my new life in his palace. My mother hugged me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "You did well. You served your purpose. Now don't shame us." The first year of marriage was exactly as Prince Abdullah had promised. We were strangers living in the same palace. I had my rooms, he had his. We saw each other at formal events, and that was all. It should have been a relief. Instead, it was torture. I was trapped in a golden cage with nothing to do, no purpose, no life. I started to understand why his other wives were never seen. They had simply given up, retreated into their own minds, stopped existing in any meaningful way. I was becoming one of them, a ghost haunting palace halls. But something inside me refused to die completely. Maybe it was that maid's words on my balcony. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was just the human will to survive. But I started to fight back in the only way I could. I started documenting everything. Every conversation, every threat, every abuse. I wrote it all down in journals that I hid throughout the palace. I thought maybe someday, someone would find them and know the truth. I also started talking to the other women in the palace, servants, wives, daughters. I realized I wasn't alone in my suffering. There were dozens of us, all trapped in different ways, all silenced by the same system. We formed a quiet network, supporting each other, sharing information, helping each other survive. It took 5 years. 5 years of careful planning, of saving money, of making connections. But eventually, I found a way out. A sympathetic guard, a forged passport, a route through the desert that wasn't watched. One night I simply walked out of the palace and never looked back. The escape itself is a story for another time. It involved danger, betrayal, moments where I thought I wouldn't make it. But I did make it. I got out. I made it to Europe, where I claimed asylum. My family disowned me publicly. They spread lies about me, said I was mentally ill, that I had abandoned my duties. Prince Abdullah divorced me immediately, happy to be rid of a wife who had proven to be more trouble than she was worth. For years I stayed silent. I was afraid they would find me, afraid they would kill me. I lived under a false name, always looking over my shoulder. But slowly, I started to heal. I went to therapy. I made real friends. I learned what it meant to be free. And now, I'm telling my story. Because I realized something important. Silence protects abusers. Silence allows the system to continue. As long as we stay quiet about what happens behind palace walls, nothing will change. There are countless other girls like me, still trapped, still suffering, still believing they have no choice. The cobra didn't kill me. My family tried to break me, but I survived. And now I'm using my voice to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about bitterness. This is about truth. This is about shining a light into dark places. This is about telling girls who are trapped right now that there is hope. There is life beyond the walls. There is a future worth fighting for. I'm Princess Yasmin. And this is my story, the whole truth that nobody knew. Closing. Strong CTA. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness to my truth. I need you to do something for me now. Subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but for every girl who is still trapped and can't speak for herself. Share this video. Let people know what really happens behind closed doors. And if you know someone who is in an abusive situation, royal or not, reach out to them. Let them know they're not alone. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because I have more stories to tell. There are more truths that need to be exposed. And together, we can create a world where no girl has to face a cobra alone. Remember, your voice matters. Your story matters. And nobody has the right to silence you. Thank you for watching. And thank you for caring.